Hi students, allow me to introduce myself before I discuss the topic. I am Mahalin Ariza Diaz, and yes, that's my picture in the slide. So my students usually call me Ma'am Madge. I belong to University of Batangas College of Arts and Sciences Psychology Department. And one of the courses or subjects that I teach or we psychology teachers teach is understanding the self. So, some of you might be wondering why you have to take this subject. One way to look at this is to consider your lives as journeys. Without paying attention to where and who you are now, you may have no sense of what will be needed to end up where you want to go. To be able to prepare you for your goal of becoming professional in your chosen fields, your knowledge must not be limited on the technicalities of your course or the principles and theories that you'll acquire from your major subjects. But you also must gain deep understanding of who you are, including your choices, your habits, your motivations, your strengths, your weaknesses, your resources and coping mechanisms for stress, and the psychology of your behavior or why you behave the way you do. Because without this understanding, your sense of individuality weakens. You may become easily influenced and pushed into a lifestyle that doesn't represent who you are. So basically, this is what this subject is mostly about. So, as an introduction to the topic, which is self in philosophical perspective or the philosophical views of the self, I'll start with a discussion about asking questions. So, among the various life creatures and organisms here on Earth, humans are considered to be at the top of the hierarchy. Bakit nga ba? That is because we humans are rational beings. Mahilig kasi tayong mag-reflect, mahilig tayong mag-introspect, and mahilig tayong magtanong. Siguro naman wala pa kayong nakikitang asong umimik at nagtanong bakit brownie yung pinangalan sa kanya. Or gulay gaya ng pechay na nag-reflect kung anong lutong magandang gawin sa kanya. Kasi only humans have the capability to reflect and ask questions. However, this capability to ask questions has become an obsession. Naging obsession na ng mga tao ang magtanong. Kaya nga never a day goes by that we don't ask questions. Ultimo, ulam tatanungin natin sa nanay natin, nasa nailagay yung cellphone, nasa ng pera, madami tayong questions. Simple questions or mas malalim na questions, araw-araw meron tayong tanong. It's because it's our instinct to look for answers. Ngayon, asking questions or this ability or capability is important because it has led for many things to emerge. In fact, everything that emerges or that has emerged always starts or started with questions. Katulad na lamang ng mga astronomers. If this group of people wasn't interested or curious enough para sagutin yung questions nila about planets, about moons, about stars, wala tayong field ng astronomy. If psychologists or this group of people was not interested or curious about behaviors and thought processes or why do people think and behave the way they do, then wala tayong field of psychology. Ganon din sa philosophy. If it wasn't for our great philosophers who spent their whole lives asking deep questions about meaning of life, morality, truth, self, there wouldn't have been a discipline called philosophy. And hindi natin makikitang importante ang tanong na, who are you? Kaya yun nga, sino ka nga ba? In this particular chapter entitled Self in Philosophical Paradigm or Perspective, we will try to gain an understanding of how various philosophers defined or conceptualized self. So, etymologically speaking, philosophy came from Greek words philia and sophia, which can be translated as the love for wisdom. The love for wisdom kasi itong mga philosophers, sila ay tinatawag ng wandering scholars because all they do is to think about the world, to search for answers, to search for truth. Anong mga truths? Like truths about oneself, truths about the world, and truths about relationships. Ngayon, the first group of philosophers, mga tinatawag na pre-Socratics. Their questions revolved mostly around the world. Ang dami nilang questions of curiosity about the world. Bakit ganito ang mundo? Ba't ganyan ang kulay ng puno? Ba't ganyan ang dagat? Ba't ganyan ang kulay ng mga damo? Those were the questions of the early philosophers. But there was this one particular philosopher who came out to question something else. This philosopher is known as Socrates. So, he was more concerned with another subject, that is, self. So, he was the first philosopher who ever engaged in systematic questioning about the self. Hence, the method of inquiry called Socratic method or dialectic method or Socratic questioning was named after him. Itong Socratic method is considered to be the foundation of critical thinking. Kasi, hindi ka lang basta magtatanong. You'll challenge the accuracy of the thought, the completeness of your thought. But aside from this method, Socrates is also known or became famous for quoting this line. Sabi niya, an unexamined life is not worth living. Bakit? Kasi not knowing oneself is like to live but die inside. Every day, you go around, ginagawa mo pa ulit-ulit yung mga activities and routine mo, pero deep inside, you have no deeper understanding of why you do these things. Hindi mo alam yung purpose mo. So, kaya, sabi ni Socrates, dapat the goal of a person is to know him or herself. Ngayon, si Socrates, sa pag-aaral niya about self, he argued that self is dualistic, na may dual nature daw ang man. Dual because it is composed of two, a body and a soul. He further categorized body as imperfect and impermanent. Kaya nga, we human beings should not be totally focused on enhancing or developing our body or physical appearance. Kasi it is by nature na ang body natin ay impermanent at imperfect. Kahit anong pagpapaganda, kahit anong retoke, o kahit anong adjustment na gawin mo dyan, kahit anong self-care, skincare ang gawin mo dyan, it would always be imperfect. Kasi yan ang characteristic ng body. And it will not be there forever kasi impermanent siya. So, where should we focus our mind on? We should focus on our soul. Socrates characterized soul as the only thing that could be perfect and permanent. So kung meron man sa bahagi ng pagkatao ng isang tao na kayang maging permanent, that is the one that is within, which is our soul. So, dun dapat daw tayo mag-focus. That is according to Socrates. Now, there is another philosopher named Plato. So, he was a student of Socrates, and he was known for expounding the ideas of his favorite teacher. Sabi niya, meron talagang soul. And this soul has three components, which have to work harmoniously so that we human beings can live a virtuous and just life. These three components of the soul are the rational soul, the appetitive soul, and the spiritual soul. Our rational soul is responsible for our intellect, or how we think. Our appetitive soul is responsible for our drives, basic needs, basic desires. And our spiritual or spirited soul is the one that governs our emotions. So it is important that we give equal importance to these three components of soul. Hindi pwedeng intellect lang, hindi pwedeng puro feelings lang, and hindi pwedeng puro basic drives or needs lang. These three must work harmoniously according to Plato. Then we have Saint Augustine. So, Saint Augustine believed that indeed self has two components. Sabi niya, it is of bifurcated nature. Dalawa, bi. So there is this part of man called the soul, and there is this part of man called body. And between these two, na nag-agree siya kay Socrates, the one incapable of reaching more immortality is the soul only. Ngayon, along with this idea, Saint Augustine is also known for conceptualizing man's search and need for happiness. Sabi niya, lagi daw tayong may constant need for happiness. Kasi we have eudaimonic characteristics in us. Pag sinabi natin eudaimonic, ibig sabihin, our satisfaction in life can only be derived from happiness. Now, the difficult question is, how to be happy? Paano nga ba maging masaya? According to St. Augustine, to be happy is to live a life that is in a movement toward love. How? We should live virtuously. And a virtuous life is living rightly. It's doing no harm to others. Ito yung paulit-ulit na paghakbang papunta sa pag-ibig at pabalik sa pag-ibig. Because there are two rules that we should follow para maging masaya. To love and to observe justice. Hindi kasi pwedeng mahal mo lang. Dapat, mahal mo ng tama. Next, we have Saint Thomas and his contention of the self. So, this saint also agreed with the idea that there are two components of man, or human beings. But he named it differently. Instead of body and instead of soul, sabi niya what we have is matter and form. A man's body is part of this matter, and our soul is in this form. And what makes humans humans is their soul and not their body. So that is according to Saint Thomas. Another person who conceptualized self is Rene Descartes. He is also known as the father of modern philosophy. So, according to Rene Descartes, man is composed of two, a body and a mind instead of soul. Aside from this idea, Rene Descartes is also known for the famous quotation which is, I think, therefore I am. Sabi ni Rene Descartes, there is so much thing in this world to doubt for. But the existence of self should not be doubted. Even if one doubts self, na hindi ka magaling sa ganyan, mahina ka dito, the fact that you doubt, that means you exist. And the fact that you think, that means you exist. And thus, the famous quote, I think, therefore I am. Going back to what I discussed a while ago, according to Rene Descartes, man is composed of mind and body. So what is mind according to him? It is the thing that thinks. And the extension of this mind is the body that works for its thoughts. Next, we have David Hume. According to Hume, self is nothing else but a bundle of impressions. Impressions are components of experiences, and that there are actually two components: impressions and ideas. Impressions come about through sensation, what one directly experiences. On the other hand, ideas come about through imagination. So, ideas are merely on our head. The direct experience that we have, yun yung tinatawag na impressions. Then we have Kant. So, Kant is also supportive of the idea of David Hume. Nasabi niya nga, we are product of our experiences. We could be product of our ideas, we could be product of our impressions. However, sabi niya, hindi tayo basta mere product of our experiences, but selected and organized experiences. Now, there is a mind that organizes this experience. We have this human reason that gives us the capacity to make judgment regarding the good. So, tayo ay produkto hindi lamang ng general experiences natin, kundi ng piling experiences sa buhay natin. And those experiences make up who we are. And then we have Gilbert Reiley. So si Gilbert Reiley, he tried to solve the mind-body dichotomy by saying that what truly matters is our behavior. That our self comes from behavior. We are all just a bundle of behaviors. Sino ka ay hindi dahil sa body mo, hindi dahil sa mind mo. Sino ka is simply because of how you behave. So if you want to understand human motives, if you want to understand who you are, then you just have to look at your own behavior. So that is according to Gilbert Reiley. And for our last philosopher, or should I say, for the last contention of self that we'll be discussing, this is derived from the idea of merleau-ponty. So, according to him, body and mind can't be separated. So, Discussing or debating which is greater between the body and mind, which rules between body and mind, is an invalid problem. Kasi these two are intertwined. According to him, they cannot be separated from one another because both of these two give humans a sense of self. For example, consider your experience when you are in the midst of activity such as dancing, singing, painting, or even listening to this. What is your experience of yourself? Most likely, you are completely absorbed in the moment. Your mind and body are functioning as one integrated entity. For Merleau-Ponty, this unified experience of yourself is the model you should use to understand your nature. So that's the end of this topic. Now, with all these 9 philosophical contentions, which do you think is compatible with your own understanding and concept of self? This ends my discussion. Thank you. Please do not forget to complete your activity and quiz that can be found in your LMS account. Have a good day. Thank you.